and welcome to Leading the Break. Today's segment features Jess Mannetti, the head women's basketball coach at Sacred Heart University. Jess's team has won the last two NEC Tournament Championships. This season, they'll be entering into a new conference, the MAAC Conference. Jess will discuss her team's entry into that conference. You guys are in the MAAC Conference now. How does that come about? How does the school get in the MAAC? Why did they want to get into the MAAC? How does that play out?
Yeah, I think the MAAC was a great part of our strategic plan with our Director of Athletics, Judy Ann, and our President. I think that the MAAC really aligns with a lot of the values that Sacred Heart aligns with. High academics, very competitive athletic opportunities for our student athletes. I think we fit right in with a lot of the schools that are there. And I think it's a basketball-focused conference, which is what we've always wanted, at least selfishly, it's what I've always wanted. So I think that being able to play in the MAAC on a more national stage, all of our games are on ESPN+, we're going to get a ton of exposure, we're going to be challenged in a lot of different ways. So I think it's a great fit for us as we move forward and continue to grow our basketball and our athletics program.
Is every athletic team in the MAAC now? Or are you guys split in different conferences?
All but four.
Okay.
So football is not in the MAAC. The MAAC obviously doesn't have football. And then there are three other sports, and off the top of my head, I can't think of them. But they're in other conferences.
Gotcha.
So I know that football has a long-term plan where they're going to end up. They just won the Yankee Conference yesterday, which is awesome. We're super excited for football. But for the other 30 or 28 sports, we're all in the MAAC.
So, how does who has the idea that we want to leave the NEC, and who decides which conference? How does the idea come up?
Well, from what I understand, we've had a bid open to the MAAC conference over the last couple of years. I think there's always been an interest for us to make the jump to the MAAC. And when Judy Ann took the helm as our Director of Athletics, I think she had a really big vision to grow the program. I think she had a really grand vision to say, hey, we want to provide for our student athletes, and we don't have to keep up with the Joneses. We are one of the Joneses now. So I think our school has positioned ourselves with its enrollment and with its ability to retain students to continue its growth exponentially. The campus looks completely different than it did when I started here 12 years ago. So I think our students are happy here. I think our athletes are challenged here in a new conference that maybe levels us up nationally, and I think that was Judy Ann's vision. And when she got in, she wasted no time, and our president jumped on board. And I think with that kind of support from that administrative level, you can't ask for better opportunities for our students and our student athletes.
So now that you're in a new conference, how have you planned to compete? Have you studied film? Have you talked to other coaches? Give me an idea of the things you've prepared for.
Well, here's the great news. The conference is right next door. So we've had a ton of non-conference games against MAAC opponents historically. The coaches are phenomenal people. They are, in the MAAC, I've never felt more welcomed and really more a part of something that has depth and strength in women's basketball. From the coaching standpoint, they really are a true community of coaches. On the women's basketball side, I know the men's basketball side as well. So I think for us, yes, it is a challenge. It's going to be different. I have done a deep dive into teams, and it's not as familiar. The NEC was very familiar. I've been coaching it for 11 years. Now this MAAC is not as familiar, right? So I think we have to do almost twice the work in our preparation to just ensure we'll be ready. But I think our players are up for the challenge, and they're ready. They have a championship mindset and championship culture intact. So I think it'll be a transition with some bumps in the road, but hopefully a smooth one as we get into the stretch of January, February.
So give me an idea. I mean, you don't have to name teams, but just give me an idea of the deep dive that you do to really prepare.
Yeah, so a team like Fairfield, who had a phenomenal season, historic season last year, right? We played them at home and lost in overtime, and there are possessions we wished we got back, as in every game that you might have a loss in. So I think you really have to study your opponent. You study their offense, you study their personnel. Quinnipiac this year is coming in hot out of the gate. They're playing great basketball. They have some personnel that's stepping up really big time for them. Manhattan returns the house. I think we have to know personnel. We have to know who's effective. We have to know what systems they run. We have to know how we match up and what our deficiencies might be or what our opponent's deficiencies might be. And then you kind of never know how conference shakes out. the more local schools like Iona and Fairfield and Manhattan, we've played. Other schools aren't as familiar. No, I don't think we've played Ryder in years. I don't think we've played Niagara in years. So I think some of those very well coached teams, our players are going to have to be ready to make adjustments out of timeouts and just do things at a little bit more of an urgent pace.
So is there a lot of film study this off season?
There's a lot of film study for the coaches.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, for us, for sure.
And how about talking to other coaches? Are coaches sharing information, giving you insight as to other MAAC teams?
Not as much. We
Okay.
don't share a ton of information on other teams. I know that we have this great camaraderie in the MAAC with the coaches. I think there's a familiarity amongst the coaches that have been there for a while that kind of embrace the newbies and say, hey, welcome to the conference, and this is how we do things, and this is our basketball standard here, which I love because there's great tradition in the MAAC. But at the end of the day, we all want to win and we all want to position ourselves, so I don't know how many secrets we're sharing in conference. At a conference we'll help each other out a little bit, but I'm not so certain in conference we can be as transparent.
Did you talk to out-of-conference coaches about the MAAC?
I have, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and truthfully, sharing information is awesome, right? It's a way to continue to keep you ahead of the game. But at the end of the day, it's when the clock is on and the lights are on that we have to perform. So no matter how many answers you might have to the tests that you're taking on the court, you still have to perform and execute.
Did you learn any things that you kind of like? You find, kind of come up with ideas just watching other MAAC teams play and say, hey, maybe I'll incorporate that with my team?
Oh, I steal stuff all the time. And so does everyone else. We have an action that we've run since I got here, and every year I'm like, oh, they run this now, and they run this now. So I think your program is always successful because as a coach, you always know what's going to work for you. And then you see other teams do things, and you're like, oh, that would be so great for our personnel, and you just adapt it to what you do. So I think there's a level of evolution that comes with coaching where you can't just do the same thing over and over and over again. You have to grow, you have to challenge your team, and your team changes every year. Right? We lost a couple really high-level players last year, and we added value this year with some transfers and some new kids. So, hey, what's our strength again? Let's relearn how we do things. And if it's stealing stuff from other teams, great. And if it's not, then we're just going to reinvent some things we do.
Now, I followed MAAC teams for the last few years. You guys had very good talent in the NEC. I don't mean just your team, but all the teams.
Yeah.
But definitely the MAAC is more physical.
Yeah.
It's faster. Are you guys ready for that challenge?
I think we're figuring that out. Our non-conference, I scheduled some really physical, up-tempo, competitive opponents that I think are very similar to our future MAAC opponents when it comes to pace or how they defend or what have you. So I think we're figuring that out. I think in the early tests, we've had some failure with response to toughness and with our response to some adversity. But you watch film, you put one foot in front of the other, and you move forward. And like yesterday, after we had a tough loss to Albany on Saturday, we watched film on Monday. We had one of the best practices we've ever had with responding to adversity. So I think for us, hey, let's just stay the course, trust the process. Our teams always get better throughout the year. We always start a little rough, and we continue to get better. And I think it's because we have a lot of resilience and we don't give up.